Thank you, Lucine, and a special thank you to Dikran and Gerard, and thank you everyone for being here. Before I start on my prepared notes, I just want to say that something Dikran and Gerard did not mention, namely that Kehat is not just a website. Kehat engages in activism in Canada, all sorts of political activism. They give lectures, they hold panel discussions, book signings. They're very much part of the Canadian Armenian political scene. Kehat is part of not just the Armenian media, but also the entire worldwide media. And of course, it's been quite a media roller coaster ride, especially here in the US, what with the elections, wars, and more. So I felt it would be thought-provoking and hopefully entertaining to toss out some ideas about today's media and also indicate how they relate to Kehat. First, fake news. We hear a lot about fake news lately. Is there such a thing? Yes, there is. Occasionally, articles appear that are hoaxes, outright false. For example, that the Pope endorsed Donald Trump. Though I myself never read that report. In fact, I've never really read any fake news at all, and I read a lot. Like you, I've read and listened to thousands of reports and opinion articles. Some were fact-based and convincing, and others were short on facts, omitted facts, or were just not convincing. But I wouldn't call any of them fake. I've learned something from all of them. I wouldn't even label denials of the Armenian genocide as fake. I would call them instead what they are: baseless, distortions, propaganda, misguided, or just plain lies. It's too easy to throw around the word fake, as we are seeing nowadays. To me, some of the biggest fake news, if I may use the word fake, is no news at all. That is, it's the omission, deliberate or otherwise, by the establishment or mainstream press of news and opinions that people really ought to know about. There are many examples. For instance, when an Israeli soldier or civilian is killed in an attack from Gaza, it's all over the mainstream media. But when Azerbaijan clearly breaks the ceasefire and kills Armenian soldiers on the front lines of Artsakh, or shells civilians in a village in Armenia proper, does the American mainstream media report that, or report it accurately? Rarely. So that's fake news by omission, and in my opinion, it's much more common than anything we could label fake news. After all, people can't understand what they don't read about or hear about. That's one reason, of course, why Azerbaijan gets away with aggression. Here's another example. The Caucasus has become a very important region for the United States and NATO to penetrate. It's part of an effort to surround Russia on the south and to build more gas and oil pipelines coming out of Azerbaijan through Georgia. And of course, Azerbaijan and Georgia are two states that are already well inclined toward NATO. So if NATO can somehow snatch Armenia away from Russia's grip, NATO would dominate the entire Caucasus right up into the Caspian Sea and into Central Asia. Russia's entire southern flank would all but collapse. But how often do you read about Armenia's centrality in the mainstream media, or even in establishment foreign policy journals? Rarely. So that's another example of fake news by omission. But you've read all about the foregoing examples if you've been reading Kehat. Personally, I think that much of the talk about fake news comes from the mainstream media because it does not like competition from alternative media, most especially alternative websites. And I mean all alternative media, whatever their political leanings. We're witnessing an attempt now to malign and marginalize independent and alternative media in the United States. And I want to make this clear. Kehat is great independent and alternative media, and it certainly does not publish any fake news whatsoever. Kehat informs, and inspires its readers. Next topic, media bias. We hear a lot about this. The fact is, virtually all media, including Armenian media, have a bias. That is, an ideology or a point of view. That's reflected in their editorials and the subjects and events they report and comment on. Much of the mainstream media purport to be unbiased, but they're not. For example, the New York Times tends towards the liberal, and the Wall Street Journal tends towards the conservative. Some media don't even pretend to be unbiased. They admit they have a point of view, and that's understandable. For example, let's take the magazines The Nation, which is left of center, and National Review, which is right of center. Most newspapers and TV news programs, however, do claim to be unbiased, but they aren't. Many times I've talked to newspaper reporters who tell me, probably truthfully, that they've never had a story turned down by their editors. Sure, because 99% of the time, they already know what their editors want and what they'll reject. It's called self-censorship. If reporters get out of line too often, they'll get a pink slip. Recall that Armenian-American writer Mark Arax tried to report on the fact that the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, was trying to defeat Armenian genocide resolutions in the U.S. Congress. He was kicked off the story. This was at the LA Times, by the way. He was kicked off the story, and his pro-Turkish editor, Doug Franz, got Jewish writers to spin the story Doug Franz, wanted. Now, Kehat does have a point of view. It's frankly Armenian. It defends Armenian interests vigorously. It doesn't hesitate to criticize, but in a fair way, whether it's the Armenian community, its leaders, the church, Armenia, and Artsakh. But it seeks to improve Armenian life, not beat it down. For example, Kehat has criticized the church in Armenia for failing to be a moral model and leader for the people. But Kehat has also defended the church, for example, when the church refused to baptize en masse, and at one time, hundreds of lost Muslimized Armenians from Turkey. The church, understandably, wanted to be cautious and not baptize Turkish citizens who may not be sincere. I'd like to talk about conspiracy theories. Mainstream media suggests that only crackpots believe in conspiracies. The dictionary definition of a conspiracy is a secret plan by two or more people or a group to do something illegal or malicious. But obviously intelligence agencies hatch conspiracies every day. That's what they do. Whoever hacked the Democratic National Committee's emails during the presidential campaign, Russia or some other party, that was clearly a conspiracy. Militaries hatch conspiracies all the time. They're called surprise attacks, like Pearl Harbor. Now, when Azerbaijan secretly plans, perhaps with another country, to attack Artsakh, that's a conspiracy. The Watergate scandal and the Nixon administration, that was a conspiracy. The Iran-Contra scandal during the Reagan administration, that was a conspiracy too. When corporations secretly agree to fix prices, which is illegal, those are conspiracies. Volkswagen conspired to rig its anti-pollution automobile system, and now it's paying the price. That was a conspiracy. The National Football League conspired to keep secret the damage caused to its players by head injuries. That was a conspiracy. In 1955, the Turkish government covertly bombed its own consulate in Thessalonica, Greece, and blamed it on Greeks. The following day, Turkey stage-managed massive anti-Greek riots in Istanbul that killed over a dozen Christians and caused hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. That was a conspiracy. If you read Kehat, you know this. In 1993, Turkey conspired with the head of the Russian parliament, a Muslim Chechen named Ruslan Khasbulatov. That's right. The Speaker of the Russian Parliament was a Muslim Chechen. Turkey conspired with Ruslan Khasbulatov to invade Armenia. It's true. If you read Kehat, you know this. The assassination of President Lincoln was a conspiracy. John Wilkes Booth did not act alone. The cover-up of the Catholic Churchy child molestation cases, that was a conspiracy too. 30 years ago, when Turkey, Israel, and some top Jewish American groups, such as the Anti-Defamation League and the American Jewish Committee, got together and agreed that these Jewish American groups would deny the Armenian genocide and try to defeat Armenian genocide resolutions in the U.S. Congress, that was a conspiracy. You know about this too, if you've been reading Kehat. But it's hard to prove conspiracies because by definition, they start off as secret. I would suggest, though, that those who dismiss all conspiracy theories out of hand may wish to consider. I'd like to speak about Armenians in the mainstream media. With the exception of some bright spots, Armenian Americans who belong to the mainstream media have been something of a disappointment in terms of Armenian issues. But it's not necessarily their fault. A person, whether Armenian or not, advances in the mainstream media, newspapers, magazines, TV, only if he or she plays along with the game and does not rock the boat too hard. Armenian issues are not really part of the game, are they? The mainstream media, the U.S. State Department, the Defense Department, the White House, large corporations, and nearly all American think tanks are essentially pro-Turkish and pro-Azeri. But the mainstream media will sometimes publish an Armenian writer if that writer insults Armenians and casts doubt on our cause. For example, unfortunately, one such writer, Melanie Tumani, her main points are that the Armenian cause is about hatred of Turks and that Armenians teach their children hate. So, the mainstream media eat that up. It's unfortunate. There are bright spots, however. To name just one, Rafi Khachadurian has written lengthy articles about Armenia in the New Yorker magazine, for which he works. Film is another bright spot, with an increasing number of independent Armenian films, and even a big budget one coming out in April called The Promise. Kehat provides a much-needed outlet for writers. For example, a young up-and-coming writer, Pers Nahigian, has written in Kehat about Artsakh, and an experienced writer, Doug Kalajian, wrote the introduction to the current Kehat compendium in your possession. Kehat has also published an extraordinary writer on geopolitics, Andrew Demerjen, Ph.D. Here are a few of his provocative titles: Planning Artsakh Civil Protection, Take Baku to the International Criminal Court, Implications of South Azerbaijan Separatism in Iran, and Viability of a Worldwide Armenian Organization. These writers' articles and much more available on Kehat's website, which is easily searchable. I'd like now to talk finally about my favorite Kehat editorials, and there are really hundreds and hundreds of them written by Girard and Dikran. I truly cannot think of any other Armenian website that has editorials with such erudition, imagination, and wit. I've put a few of these editorials in different categories. For example, the practical category. A Kehat editorial entitled Letters to the Editor. It listed 24 great suggestions for Armenian letter writers who sent to non-Armenian media, such as cite non-Armenian sources when you want to establish the veracity of your facts and arguments. Good advice. And whether your letter is published or not, send it to Armenian media, thus sharing your effort and facts with other Armenians to inform and encourage them. Great suggestion. Under the historical category, there was an editorial entitled Historical Encounters with Unsung Armenians. For example, well-known mystery writer Agatha Christie visited Syria and Iraq in the 1940s with her archaeologist husband and met two cab drivers, one of them being an Armenian genocide survivor. Here's what Agatha Christie writes. One cab driver lets hardly a day pass without clamoring for a salary advance. He would have splashed his salary all about in the local coffee house. Agatha Christie goes on. Aristide, the Armenian cab driver, however, has displayed the greatest reluctance to have a penny for his salary paid him. You will keep it for me, he said, Mrs. Christie, until the journey is finished. Now, at the end of the trip in Beirut, when his British tourist customers asked Aristide what he would do with the money he had earned while chauffeuring, the Armenian driver says, it will go towards buying a better taxi. And when you have a better taxi, the British tourist asked, said the Armenian cab driver, then I shall earn more and have two taxis. Under the political category, it's a great editorial named Eastmania, Westmania, Russia and Armenia relations, pluses and minuses, and the U.S. and Armenia relations, pluses and minuses. And I want to just cite a couple of minuses, actually. Here's a minus with Russia. It's something that should be borne in mind. Russia, under Putin, is a one-man show. It's difficult for Armenia to maintain a confident relationship with a country, Russia, which is just a heartbeat away from uncertainty, if not chaos. Here's a minus with the United States. When jihadists killed the U.S. ambassador in Benghazi, Libya, the U.S. put its embassies on high alert, including the humongous one in Yerevan. Although Armenia is a Christian country and there are no jihadists there whatsoever. Such insensitivity is hard to accept. And probably some of you remember this incident. It was absolutely infuriating. I'm not sure it was even a mistake. It might have been done by certain enemies of Armenia in the U.S. State Department. Under the humorous category, there was an editorial named Goodbye Columbus. It's a quote. So what's the new and stunning discovery from Professor Erdogan's scriptorium cum laboratory? America was discovered by Muslims in the 12th century. Americanologist Erdogan even provided the exact year of the discovery, 1178. That's what's new, the editorial goes on, from the Erdogan Institute of Looney Tunes. During a television speech in Istanbul at the Summit of Latin American Muslim Leaders on November 15th, Dr. Erdogan revealed that Columbus had mentioned the existence of a mosque on a hill along the Cuban coast. He didn't say whether it was on the northern shore, close to the tourist-infested Varadero resort, or on the southern coast near Guantanamo. The editorial goes on, maybe Turks also invented farming, monotheism, the alphabet, philosophy, the arts, the printing press, the law of gravity, French fries, and the hula hoop. And Turkish astronauts landed on the sun in 10,000 BC. Finally, a Kehat feature in the last few years titled Heroes and Villains. It's one of my favorites. Here's a villain. Georgia, Armenia's treacherous neighbor, which sleeps with Turkey and Azerbaijan, oppresses the Armenians of Georgia, particularly those in Javakhh, and refuses to recognize the Armenian genocide, even though it occurred within sight of Georgia's own borders. Here are some heroes. The Armenians of Aleppo, Armenia, and Artsakh, for their steadfastness, sacrifice, and love of our nation in the face of untold physical and economic suffering. Thank you, and a special thank you to our heroes, Dikran and Girard.